Here's another one that's been a long time coming. I don't mind Spinner and Emma as a couple, and Degrassi Takes Manhattan is not the worst thing to happen in the show. That would be Drew and Claire having sex. Hell, I'd say it's not even the worst written part of the show, as in my opinion that should go to the early half of season 13. I can understand why many dislike the special because it's not only about Spinner and Emma getting married out of nowhere, but that it marked the end of Spinner and Jane. Again, I don't mind it either. Yeah, I thought they were a good pair and they had a lot of history together, but you could say that about plenty of other couples in the show, like Jenna and Casey, or Drew and Bianca. People tend to screw up good things out of boredom or curiosity for spice. Even though what you had with Spinner was great, it's understandable that Jane felt her relationship was rather oatmeal at the time. At the point where she met Declan, she and Spinner had been together for nearly a year and a half, and she was starting to wonder if she still felt the spark for her boyfriend. High school is a time of exploration, and Jane didn't think she was ready to permanently settle down. But in her desire for something new, she still cared about him and didn't really want to let go. Unfortunately, it took cheating for her to realize this meant that she did love Spinner and that she wanted to stay his girlfriend. But sometimes drastic measures are needed to clear the fog of introspection. And of course Spinner was going to flip once he found out. Not just on Jane for cheating, but also on Holly J for hiding it as well. It's almost impossible to come back from infidelity, as any relationship going forward would be tainted by it. Sure, couples even in Degrassi have bounced back after, but Spinner wasn't the kind of guy to just let go all of the pain it caused. One of the most important things to know about Emma and Spinner is where they were in their lives when this all went down. Spinner did not get into police school, he didn't go to college, but was happy with the job he used to hate, didn't care about being rich and famous, and frankly didn't care to leave Toronto. He'd done a lot of maturing and was ready to move into the domestic stage of his life, whereas Jane was ready for adventure outside of her hometown, be it New York or Stanford. Then with Emma, she was just ready to come home. She was unsatisfied with university, for the first time in her life finding school difficult, especially after all of her friends moved on to separate projects. Her Save the World with Bikes campaign made her homesick, and she was seeking a sense of the familiar. She wanted the family, friends, acquaintances, and the life she left behind in Toronto. Her adventuring was basically done. When you consider where they both were in their lives, it's understandable why they might gravitate towards each other. At that point, they both wanted similar things. No desire for fame or grand travels, just to live a comfortable life in the community they love. They were already kind of friends by season 9, Spinner even sorta comforting Emma after her breakup with Kelly and attending her barbecue. But there's also one major factor that defies reason, the sense of why not? They were making each other happy, they cared about each other's well-being, and they were having fun together. When they realized what they'd done in their alcohol-influenced state, after the initial desire to reverse such a major decision, they thought, well, maybe this is the happiness I'm looking for. Perhaps this is the universe directing me back on my path. What's the harm in exploring a life with this person who I like spending time with? Let's see if love blossoms. It's not unheard of for people in marriages with little courting before the wedding to come out with a happy life together. Some people have found arranged marriages to be beneficial for them. My favorite example in fiction of a love developed during marriage is Tevye and Golda from Fiddler on the Roof. They met on their wedding day, and 25 years later, they found they'd grown to love each other. That was actually how my first real relationship began. I knew my best friend in high school liked me, but I wasn't certain I felt the same way. Then, during a sleepover one night, they broached the subject again, and I thought, why not? And thus kicked off a year and a half of dating. I'd already had a deep emotional bond with them, and was far more intimate than I'd ever been with anyone else in my life. And I didn't dislike them romantically, so I decided to see where this path would lead. And I don't regret it. Even though we ended up going our separate ways, I'm glad I took a chance on the unknown. We were there for each other at the right time, even if we aren't near as close as we were then. I still see it as a positive event in my life. Does this mean Spinner and Emma will work out as a couple? No, I'm still with Miriam McDonald and Shane Kipple in that they would later divorce, but are still friendly enough that they now co-own the dot. Was it still a rushed and ill-reasoned decision on both their parts? Yup, but again, not unrealistic, as our world rarely operates on logic. Reality is stranger than fiction because fiction at least needs to make sense. Hell, it doesn't even bother me that Emma actually did her health foods project in grade 8 and not in grade 9 like she states, or that Spinner claims it caused him to start boycott the calf when actually it was finding a bug in his food. People's memory is imperfect, and given my own experience with remembering things, it's hard to imagine that they'd be able to keep such mundane and ultimately useless facts accurate. I mean, I doubt they rewatched seasons 1 and 2 of Next Generation as many times as I have. It doesn't matter to me that Jay calls Jane a stone-cold heartbreaker because of course he'd see her that way. He's the best friend of the guy she cheated on. Would you really expect him to have a high opinion of her, especially considering that Jay isn't really her friend anyway? However, I don't think it was a good way to cap off Jane's class, as it focused only on Jane and those who didn't graduate in the special. Say what you want about other Degrassi graduations, but at least they tended to put the spotlight on those departing. I don't disparage it as a character decision, but the wedding was not a good choice from a writing perspective in terms of where it was placed. I'd actually have the same problem even if it was, say, Jay and Manny getting married. Just didn't fit with the start of the special where we saw a few longtime residents of the Degrassi halls reach graduation. Not exactly a proper send-off. I mean, the most satisfying thing to me in that whole graduation sequence was getting to see the conclusion of Double D. The plotline with Declan, Fiona, and Holly J is something I don't mind in this though because it sets up conflicts and development in the season to come. It's actually a huge turning point for Fiona as a character because it marks the end of her relying on Declan for everything and the beginning of her being her own person. I've said this once, but I feel that I need to say it again. No. Fiona kissing Declan was not because she was sexually or even romantically interested in her brother. It was an act of desperation as she felt that Holly J was stealing him away and all of their lives the twins only had each other. But suddenly Declan's world was expanding and he was serious about another girl while Fiona still relied on him to be her only friend. It was important for her to conflict with Holly J and for Declan to finally confront his sister on her actions so that Fiona could start getting help and being conscious of how she affects others. And on top of all that, it hints to Fiona's alcohol problem. Overall, it might be my favorite Degrassi special simply because I tend not to be fond of them as a whole. I find the least to disagree with here. Again, there are other more atrocious writing and character decisions in the show, even if a fan favorite couple broke up in it. I can understand why two people with no romantic attraction previously would honestly consider trying intimacy, especially when they're in such a transitional state as Emma and Spinner were. If they spent more time together, I could see them possibly gravitating towards each other naturally and without alcohol or accidental weddings. They'll never be my favorite couple, but I can't hate them, especially as they capture that carpe diem spirit towards love that I have felt before as well. At least the show didn't break the characters in the process like poor Claire and Drew. Alright, Scooter, you want to be in a video? You're gonna be in the video! If you've been hearing some pitter-patter in the background, that would be my cat, because she says it's time for me to go to bed, and she's right. So we'll make this as quick and painless as possible. If you actually care to keep up with the things that I make and am involved with, follow this Discord invite link. There you'll have access to the content stream of things that I and my friends make. You'll also be able to chat with me in my NotAVampyre crypt when I'm available. And then you can also find me on Twitter, NotAVampyre. Thank you very much for consuming this video, and until next time. Scooter, I wonder if you're purring into the microphone. Purr. Yes. Purr for me.